Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. I told you we'd be churning out videos this week as the Packers get set to take on the Eagles wildcard weekend Sunday, 3:30 p.m. on Fox, 2-seed versus the 7-seed. First video was a first look or a first glance at the matchup. This time I want to dive into how can the Packers go into Philadelphia and beat the Eagles? How can they pull off, I guess what some would label a mini upset in terms of seeding for sure, and do what Green Bay did last year when they were the 7-seed, went on the road and clobbered the Dallas Cowboys. I would be stunned if they clobbered Philadelphia. I think a win for Green Bay would be a close win in nature, and if the odds makers are correct, this should be a close game on Sunday. A close game that gets decided by one or two mistakes, or perhaps one or two explosive plays by one of these offenses. Philadelphia opens as a 3.5-point favorite. Last I checked, they were a 4.5-point favorite. So the odds makers are trying to tell you they think this should be a close game. And if you want a point of reference, this is the 2-7 matchup in the NFC. The 2-7 matchup in the AFC is Buffalo against Denver. Buffalo opened as an 8.5-point favorite, now creeping towards being a 9-point favorite. So a big difference there in the 2 versus 7 matchups in the AFC and the NFC. So the odds makers, I think, are liking Green Bay a little bit more than a lot of Packer fans based off what we've seen these last 2 weeks. And I said in my first video, we're going to talk about how Green Bay can do this thing on Sunday and advance to take on Detroit in the divisional round. I said in my first look at the matchup video this week, I won't be drawn much from the week 1 matchup. It's just two very different teams at this stage. And again, my point of contention for believing in not taking too much from the regular season opener between these two teams in Brazil comes down to the staff changes we saw in the offseason. Philadelphia not only ushered in a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, but a defensive coordinator as well in veteran Vic Fangio. Green Bay got rid of Joe Barry and brought in their own new defensive coordinator in Jeff Hafley, who was the head coach at Boston College, made the change from head coach in college football to defensive coordinator in the National Football League. And early on in those first few regular season games, when you have a new OC, you have a new DC, or in Philly's case, both, it is a feel-out process. It just is, trying to get comfortable within the scheme. And Green Bay changed its base defense look. The main reason Preston Smith asked Green Bay politely for a trade and was granted that and was sent off to the Pittsburgh Steelers was because he just didn't feel like he was fitting in the new base defense and in Jeff Hafley's scheme. And so it takes time. And so I don't draw much from the week 1 matchup and look at certain things in circle and be like, oh gosh, this is going to pop up again. Like, certainly there will be similarities. Some things that could pop up in that first matchup that reoccur on Sunday when these two teams butt heads. I won't be putting too much stock into what happened in Brazil all the way back in September. One thing, too, I want to get it out of the way before we dive into the meat and potatoes part of this video. I'm getting sick and tired this week of hearing, and it's not just one or two outlets or content creators or posts on Twitter that I'm seeing it. It's quite a few where Packer fans are just reminding everyone, like, hey, you got to keep in mind, this is the youngest team in the NFL. Regardless of what happens in Philadelphia on Sunday, the Packers have the youngest team in the NFL. We know, I know, we know. I don't give a shit that Green Bay, don't use it as a crutch. That's what it's being used as. It's not being used as like a friendly reminder, like, hey, Green Bay made the playoffs and they're the youngest team in the NFL for the second season in a row. That's pretty cool. The way it's being phrased and orchestrated by people, and where I'm seeing it at on YouTube and on Twitter, is, hey, if Green Bay loses to the Eagles, got to remember, like, last year was basically year 0. This is year 1, and the next year is year 2. They're still the youngest team in the NFL. I don't give a rip. Don't use it as a crutch. I am getting agitated by how much I'm seeing that. And if you want a reference point on the other end of the coin for all these people talking about, hey, Green Bay, it's the youngest team in the National Football League, it's almost like, are we supposed to cut them some slack or something, or just like, pat them on the back if they go out and get clubbed by Philadelphia, which I don't think will happen. But it's just a weird way to paint a picture by some leading into this matchup. And I would look at the other side of the coin and offer up a rebuttal by saying, who has the youngest defense in the NFL? The Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles have the youngest defense, average age of the starters, in the NFL, Vic Fangio's group. And I don't hear a peep out of Philadelphia players, coaches, and it's not Packers players, coaches talking about being the youngest team, but I don't see anything from, and I've looked at some videos this week already, watched them from Eagles content creators to see how they feel about this matchup in the lead up to this wild card tilt in Philly on Sunday. I haven't heard one peep about, hey, no matter what happens against Green Bay on Sunday, just remember, like, Vic Fangio's got the youngest defensive group in the NFL. I haven't seen it once, but it's true. Philadelphia has the youngest defense in the NFL. And they just wrapped up a season where the Eagles were number 1 in the NFL in total defense and number 3 in scoring defense. Vic Fangio's goons, and I say that as a compliment, allowed just 278.4 yards and 17.8 points per game. As the youngest defense in the NFL, number 1 in total defense, 278.4 yards per pop, 17.8 points per contest. Haven't heard anyone bring that up on Philadelphia's side. Not the numbers, but the, hey, you know what? It's a youth movement on this defense. I haven't heard it. So I'm getting irritated hearing it so many times from Packer fans. Don't use it as a crutch. Just don't. Puff that chest out a little bit. Get ready for a 12-round fight against Philadelphia. And how do the Packers crack the code, right? Purpose of this video, after I just went off on a tangent there, I apologize. Subscribe if you haven't already. It's Mitch. I am on YouTube. How do the Packers crack the code? How do they beat Philadelphia? How do they right the wrongs from was it a 5-point loss in Brazil week 1? I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. You're the underdog in this game, but you're not a 17-point underdog. This isn't, who did Oregon play week 1 in college football or week 2? They played Idaho or Idaho State. And Idaho or Idaho State, whoever it was pulling out all the stops, all the trickery, all the tomfoolery, all the gimmick plays, and they were hanging in there punch for punch in a low-scoring game against Oregon. Green Bay's not Idaho or Idaho State, whoever the heck it was. They're a really good team. Are they a great team? I don't think so. Philadelphia's not invincible on the other side of the coin. You know, the Bears tried all this trickery against Green Bay, and they won in Week 18. Trick play on a punt return went for a touchdown. They tried another one with a reverse pass. Keenan Allen threw an interception right to Xavier McKinney. They tried another one on a pitch play on a kick return. Returner slipped up at his own 19-yard line. Green Bay doesn't need to try to pull out all the stops as far as trick plays and gimmicks. They don't need to try to reinvent the wheel. Philadelphia's going into this matchup thinking, if we stop Josh Jacobs and really keep him within the tackle box and bottled up, we feel good about our chances. If you're the Packers, you don't look at that and say, man, we need to call for a change-up. Trust your offensive line. Trust Josh Jacobs. He's the bell cow for a reason. There's a reason Josh Jacobs only played the first half against Chicago. You want those legs to be as fresh as possible coming into this matchup against Philadelphia. Don't worry about the Eagles knowing what you're going to lean on as your bread and butter in this game. Trust it anyways. Don't come out pass on the first drive. You remember the game against the Lions? Green Bay goes right down the field on the opening drive. They cough it up. Detroit recovers. Or the Vikings game, excuse me. They go right down the field, opening drive, Josh Jacobs shoving it down the Vikings defense throats. Fumble, Minnesota recovers, defense gets a stop. They punt it back to Green Bay. Green Bay's buried inside their own 10. And it's almost like they just said, okay, well, we fumbled on the opening drive, and they go pass, punt. Don't try to switch things up now. Now is not the time to try to get overly crafty. I don't think, at least. And maybe you have to pull out one rabbit from the hat, but trust your pre-snap motion and trust Josh Jacobs. And I think the pre-snap motion is a key in this one. And not having Christian Watson for some of that orbit motion and that jet motion really sucks. But you still have Jaden Reed. And the pre-snap motion, to me, has not had the effect that it had the first 10, 11, 12 weeks of the season. The passing game, in my opinion, has taken a step back for the Packers. But you can't be hesitant and you can't be gun-shy in a win-or-go-home scenario on the road. But lean on Josh Jacobs early. And for all this, Philadelphia has the youngest defense in the NFL talk I've stated already. Keep them on their toes. Don't keep it vanilla. And I'm not talking about trick plays. I'm specifically referencing the pre-snap motion. Try to get a look that you like. Jaden Reed's been MIA for a while now. Like, we're at a point where it's almost as if we should put out an Amber Alert for Jaden Reed. He's been MIA after a hot start to the season. He had a great game against Philadelphia in week 1. Again, I don't put too much stock into the matchup specifically. But use that pre-snap motion. Get it back in your favor. Try to put, all the pressure is on Philadelphia in this one. If you can jump out to an early lead, it's going to add a layer to that. Green Bay can add that layer, add that anxiety to the Eagles side of things. And it sounds simple with the pre-snap motion and me saying give it to Josh Jacobs. If he has anything less than 25 touches, I think they probably lose this game. Week 1, it was 34 passes to 20 runs. If that's the split in this game, I'm assuming Green Bay's playing behind multiple scores trying to frantically catch up. And it sounds like a cop-out to say this because you can apply it to any team. How can the Packers beat the Eagles? What are things they have to do? One of the big keys outside of don't try to reinvent the wheel and get cute now. Try to get off to a quick start. And I'm not talking get up 17-0 or 21-0 on Philadelphia. Try to score first. 3-0, 7-0, 10-3, 10-7. Try to get an early lead. Every team wants to do it. It's almost imperative for Green Bay to do so, and here's why. If you look at the Packers in their losses this year, they get down, they almost seem to start to panic scramble, dig a bigger hole, and then try to make a miraculous comeback. Green Bay trailed Minnesota 28-0 at Lambeau Field in Week 4. Made a furious rally at the end, lost 31-29, I think it was. But they trailed 28-0. Minnesota's a pretty damn good team. Second matchup at US Bank Stadium just a couple weeks ago. Green Bay trailed 27-10 midway through the fourth quarter. Made a furious comeback, late rally, fell short. Green Bay trailed Detroit 24-3 late in the third quarter at Lambeau Field earlier this season. At Ford Field a few weeks later, they trailed 17-7 at halftime. Both instances, more so the game in Detroit. Late rally, took a lead in the second half, almost pieced it together, lost 34-31 on a walk-off field goal from Bates in Detroit. Green Bay has had a knack when they play good teams, Detroit twice, Minnesota twice. Get down early, almost scramble around in panic, dig a bigger hole, and then start to figure it out when they have to rush and hurry up in the second half because the clock becomes the enemy in a major, major way. Fell short twice against Minnesota, twice against Detroit. Every team wants to say, hey, we want to get out to an early lead and put the pressure on the opposition. I think for the Packers, it is more critically important for them to do so than other teams. Again, every team wants to do it. For the Packers, based off the resume this year and what we've seen, when they play good teams and they trail early, not only trail early, but trail big early, 28-0 against Minnesota, 27-10 against Minnesota, 24-3 against Detroit, 17-7 against Detroit. It is crucial for them to try to get a leg up early on against Philadelphia. And believe me, I understand every team wants that. For the Packers, it feels more important because of what we've seen when they do get down against top-tier competition. And remember again, all the pressure's on Philadelphia. It truly is. A lot of that pressure is on the shoulders of its head coach, Nick Sirianni. Add a layer of anxiety, angst, nervousness to Philadelphia by jumping out to an early lead in a game where you're an underdog. And most, I believe, even Packer fans, your heart tells you one thing, your mind tells you another, right? If you ask Packer fans and they say, Green Bay's going to win this game, a lot of them might really believe it, but a lot of them are probably talking with their heart and not their mind. Jump out to an early lead, lean on Josh Jacobs. Don't give a damn that Philadelphia knows you're going to feature Josh Jacobs. Every opponent from the second half on, or even before that, knew that Green Bay's offense is predicated on feeding number 8 and setting up the play-action pass. Don't change course now. I know there's problems within the passing game that would lead you to believe maybe changing some things up is the way to go in the playoffs. I'm fine with minor tweaks. But the phrase I used earlier just a few minutes ago, Don't reinvent the wheel. That's a sign of panic. Trust Josh Jacobs. Try your damnedest to get an early lead. If that means winning the coin toss and electing to receive, which they've done a few times down the stretch run, so be it. That could put some pressure on the Green Bay offense early, though. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. Packers, Eagles, wild card weekend in Philadelphia, the 2 seed versus the 7 seed. The pre-snap motion I mentioned, too. It's a staple of this offense. It's just lacked a punch in recent weeks. It hasn't been as forceful, as dynamic, as fruitful as I'm sure Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love would have hoped it to be. And I mentioned Watson out takes away an element of that, but you still have Jaden Reed, who's largely been MIA for a while now. Try in a way to use the youthfulness of the Eagles defense against them by mixing up looks on offense and constantly having their eyes shifting by sending guys in motion, whether it's Dobbs, Bo Melton, Malik Heath, Reed, Wicks, Tucker Kraft. Man, wouldn't it be nice to see Luke Musgrave get involved in the passing game a little bit? That's your vertical threat at tight end, or supposed to be your vertical threat at tight end. I think the pre-snap motion is going to be key in this to try to garner up and develop some big shot plays, because it's a Philadelphia defense that I don't have the exact number in front of me. I'll have it for the final thoughts video. I know for a fact Philadelphia's defense allowed the least amount of 20-plus yard passes this year in the National Football League. And so you might not have many chances to get those big chunk plays. But if that motion in the pre-snap can even set up 8-9 yards on a crosser or a slant quick hit or whatever it is, a jet touch pass, right from the rip, it could be key in this one for Green Bay. I think it would be. As for the passing game, Jordan Love was one of the most blitzed quarterbacks in the NFL this year, according to blitz percentage. And, he was somewhat miserable against it. The first 8 games, he was 33rd in passer rating. It improved a little bit the last few weeks, and then it took another step back in the game against Minnesota, where Brian Flores, who always dials up the blitz, was dialing it up yet again. The good thing for Green Bay in this matchup, Philadelphia doesn't really blitz. They don't. Out of the 32 teams in the National Football League, Philadelphia's 27th in blitz percentage. Green Bay's below them at 29th. Jeff Hafley doesn't dial it up a whole hell of a lot either. But Jordan Love, who was not good facing the blitz the first half of the season, again, 33rd in passer rating, thought it got better. It was weird because the passing game seemed to kind of dip a little bit, but Love facing pressure and facing a blitz seemed to get a little bit better before they faced Minnesota a couple weeks ago. Eagles don't blitz. I'd be curious to see how often Fangio blitzed in week 1, and if knowing the numbers for Jordan Love in those first 8 weeks of the season, if he gets a little bit of an itch or a little bit of curiosity to try to maybe bring more pressure than he usually does for Philadelphia's defense. And again, that's all within this chess match of the back and forth that we'll see on Sunday. But at its base, Jordan Love, a large chunk of this season, not good against the blitz. Good thing for them, Eagles don't blitz that much. 27th in blitz percentage out of 32 teams. Green Bay, again, one of those teams that were lower. I don't think this is weird to say. Josh Jacobs' success or lack thereof, depending on how things shake out Sunday, will have a big factor on the passing game. I might be stating the obvious there, but if Josh Jacobs can't get going and you're facing, second and long, third and long, obvious passing down scenarios, not good for Green Bay. I think the domino effect for Green Bay's offense will be getting Josh Jacobs going early in this game against Philadelphia. He holds the key. He holds the key for Green Bay's offense. They need Jacobs to really try to feast or rip off a couple of big ones to open up the passing game. Whereas last year in the second half of the season, I thought the passing game was so on fire for Green Bay going to the playoffs. And then it was in the playoffs in Jerry World when they were playing Dallas. And the running game, Aaron Jones, didn't he have like 2 or 3 100-yard games in the last few weeks of the regular season. And as much as we like to think the running game in LaFleur's offense opens up the passing game, I just thought the passing game was vibing and clicking so well last year in the second half, regardless of what the running game looked like. And it just so happened that down the final few weeks of last year's campaign that the run game was in a different tier as well. This year, to me, just feels different these last few weeks, where I would be surprised if, like, Green Bay's passing game torched Philadelphia while Jacobs struggled. You know, like, I just don't see that happening, where Green Bay, and I would love to be wrong, obviously not about the Jacobs part, but the passing game flourishing regardless of how the running game does. I just don't have that same feel with the Packers passing game entering this postseason as I did a year ago. And I don't know how you guys and gals feel about it. You can let me know. But Jacobs, where would this offense be without Josh Jacobs? It's a terrifying thought. It really is. He holds the key to so much of the success that this offense can have against Philadelphia. And it works hand in hand with the offensive line. Because if you bring up Josh Jacobs and him needing to have success, you have to bring up the run game. And those guys that are paving holes. Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Sean Ryan, and of course Zach Tom, who should get a blank check in the offseason. Fill it in yourself. We need to keep you here for the long run. And so I wish the passing game was in a different, I don't want to say mindset. I just wish I had a different feel or more good juju about the passing game, but I have more questions. And I won't say doubts, and I won't say pessimism. I just have more questions about the passing game entering this postseason, which puts more of a focal point and more of the spotlight on Josh Jacobs. That's why you can't have 34 passes and 20 runs against Philadelphia like you did in week 1. The game script it's not going to work this time around against Philadelphia. It just isn't. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Looking at how the Packers can beat the Eagles. Get Josh Jacobs going early. Effectively use the pre-snap motion that we saw keep so many defenses guessing the last couple of years that we just haven't seen it pack the same punch these last few weeks. Try to get out to an early lead because, again, while everyone wants to do it, it's proven to be very critical for Green Bay when they play good teams so that they don't dig a gigantic hole. On the flip side with the defense, the number one thing, I'll keep it simple in this, and then we'll dive into big numbers in the final thoughts video later in the week. Go down swinging. I'm not kidding you. I'm not saying this facetiously. I'm still very irked about Jeff Hafley's play call on the second to last play against Chicago on Sunday. To play the Bears, who you've beaten 11 times in a row, and you are big brother to their little brother, to come out in that scenario with 15 seconds left and play a prevent and really line the sidelines with players so that they can't get out of bounds, but leave a big chunk of the field right in field goal range wide open, to concede a 20-yard pass and just hope that the football gods won't let them spike it in time when 15 seconds to throw a 20-yard pass, as long as your quarterback isn't dancing around and then go spike it, is plenty of time. And the Bears proved that it was plenty of time to do that. I did not like that. For all the good karma and all the good vibes that Jeff Hafley brought throughout the year, I thought, I'm not calling Jeff Hafley this because I think he's done a really good job as a defensive coordinator. I thought that play call was loser mentality football. And I brought it up in the first video this week, but it still bothers me because I thought this defense, it's far from a polished product. I thought they had turned the corner in terms of they aren't going to get bullied, even when they struggle. The run defense has been pretty good for Green Bay. Facing Saquon's going to be a different beast. They understand that. But I do trust this run defense, and I trusted this defense that they had built a little edge to themselves. And that one play call tore down a couple of those pillars. And I know it's one call within the game, but it reminded me of what was the 4th and 26 against Philadelphia in the playoffs over a decade ago. It reminded me of Colin Kaepernick running it all over Green Bay in the playoffs, again, over a decade ago. I think that would have been too. It reminded me of how soft Green Bay's defense got in the NFC Championship when it had a 2-score lead against Seattle late, and then lost in overtime. Like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I was at the game, and I told you guys in the last video, I know, but I looked at my 3 buddies who are Bear fans, and I said, they have 15, 20 yards, just hand it over to them on a platter if they want it. And so you're playing Philadelphia. Go down swinging. Hopefully Green Bay gets Evan Williams and Quay Walker back. We know Jair's done. Don't play scared. Don't play hesitant. Don't do the bullshit we saw in the second to last play against Chicago. Be the aggressor. Don't overwhelm yourselves, but trust your run defense. And don't. This is the only part that maybe I am wrong on. Well, I shouldn't say that. That sounds kind of arrogant. This is the only part that I'm questioning, I should say, with my thought process for the defense. In the first matchup, again, which I don't draw a lot from, Green Bay did not get hardly any pressure on Jalen Hurts in the passing game, and he had an eternity to throw the ball on many dropbacks. But they were clearly playing a contain on the edges to not let Hurts get outside the pocket and run wild on him. And it worked for Jeff Hafley. Jalen Hurts had 13 carries for 33 yards against Green Bay in Brazil. And so I think it'd be easy to say, man, he didn't beat us with his legs the first time around. We can repeat that. I think it's more important to try to get pressure on Jalen Hurts this time around because we've seen on a repeat cycle, the Packers pass rush, when rushing 4, has really struggled to get pressure on the opposing quarterbacks this year, and they've carved up Green Bay at times. And it's not the secondary's fault. I'm not going to solely blame the pass rush. I'm not going to solely blame Jeff Hafley. But I do believe that going with a similar method of, hey, we really need to be on like red alert. Don't let Jalen Hurts beat us with his legs. Keep contained. And if we have to risk losing a pass rush on a consistent basis in this one, so be it. I don't like that method. I don't. I think Jalen Hurts was too comfortable, even though he couldn't break free on any long runs against Green Bay. And I'd rather see them dial up pressure and try to make him uncomfortable. Again, I'm assuming Jalen Hurts is going to be out there Sunday. Still, as of the time of recording this video, hasn't been cleared from concussion protocol. So he had way too much time in week 1. And yes, he didn't beat you with his legs. But if we're doing pick your poison, the defense has been shredded by a lack of a pass rush this year consistently. So I say bring Edger and Cooper. Bring a safety blitz with Bullard if Williams is back and Bullard's in the slot. I can't take watching this defense play conservatively and playing hesitant. Go down swinging. Go down swinging if nothing else. That's what I want to see from Jeff Hafley's group. We'll have more videos throughout the week, at least one more. Final thoughts. Maybe a live play-by-play and reaction for the first half on Sunday. We'll see. But odds makers are saying it should be a close one. I think most are picking Philadelphia. They're not invincible. They're not unbeatable. But Green Bay is going to have to cut out a lot of the BS with its own mistakes. And again, don't try to get too cute in this one. Just trust Josh Jacobs. You have throughout the year. And let that open up your passing game too. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. We'll see you next time.